This is Mel Barrett. I have a short public service announcement for you before we get into this next episode. Human trafficking is a situation in which an individual is compelled to work or engage in commercial sex through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. If the individual is under the age of 18 and engaging in commercial sex, they are experiencing trafficking, regardless of whether force, fraud, or coercion is also taking place. If you or someone you know is being trafficked, please contact these resources. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline toll-free 24/7 at 1-888-373-7888. Or text the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 233-733. Or chat with the National Human Trafficking Hotline via humantraffickinghotline.org/chat. Interpreters are only available via phone call. Report missing children or child pornography to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678. This episode of The In-Between is intended for mature audiences and includes topics such as emotional, sexual, and physical violence. Testimony shared by guests of the show is their own and does not reflect the views of Mel Barrett or Ruby Grace Productions. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, this is probably a long shot, but I'm trying to do my due diligence. My name is Mel Barrett, and I'm a journalist and the host of the In-Between podcast. I'm currently investigating the Veronika Rodriguez case, and your name popped up as someone who may have dated Fahad. Would you be open to speaking with me on background? I can keep you anonymous, completely hide your identity. I just need to verify information that I've received, so please let me know.
Mel, your outreach is completely inappropriate and unprofessional. This is my business contact form, not a space for you to dig into people's private lives under the guise of quote-unquote journalism. The case you're referencing is closed. I have no involvement, no interest, and absolutely nothing to say to you. Do not email me again. If you reach out via any other platform, I will consider it harassment and will take legal action if necessary. Lose my name, lose my email, and find a better use of your time.
Hi, I hear you, and I want to assure you it was not my intention to offend or cause discomfort. I reached out in good faith as part of an ongoing investigation into a case that has raised serious concerns, not just about the individuals involved, but about broader issues affecting women and children in this community. My work on this story stems from a deep concern that there may be individuals at risk of exploitation, including potential sex trafficking, sexual assault, and sexual abuse, and I'm committed to reporting on it with care, accuracy, and integrity. That said, I respect your request and will not contact you again. If at any point you decide you'd like your perspective reflected or clarified, the door is open. All the best. Mel Barrett.
Let me make this clear one final time. There is no open case. The matter is closed. The verdict has been made and nothing you write changes that. I don't care what you're quote-unquote investigating, and I'm not interested in being involved or used for your story. Your assumptions and implications are inappropriate and baseless. Do not email me again. If I receive any further contact from you, I'll consider it harassment. Lose my name, lose my email.
Yikes. I think I struck a chord. What you just listened to is a recreation of an email exchange with an ex-girlfriend of Fahad Pervez, the man Veronika Rodriguez accused of sexual assault. What came next shocked even me.
Fahad Pervez.
Hey, Fahad, it's Mel Barrett. I'm just getting in touch. It's 8:30. I'll try you back in a few minutes. Okay. Let's see if he actually answers the phone. He is. Hey, Fahad, how are you?
Hey, I'm all right. Sorry, I think it goes to voicemail automatically, so
Oh, no worries.
appreciate the practice.
Yep, you heard that right. That's Fahad Pervez calling to speak with me on record, no holds barred. But we'll get to that lengthy and insightful conversation a little bit later. Right now, I want to tell you about the investigation into Veronika's report of sexual assault by the Fort Indian Town Gap Police Department. The two investigators on the case were Officer Randy Servitsky and Sergeant Devin Kramer. One of this duo will become chief of police mere months after the investigation was concluded. That will become extremely important later, so put a pin in it for now. So who are Randy Servitsky and Devin Kramer? Let's start with Serviski, since his record is shorter than Devin's, a lot shorter. On January 7th, 2019, the Upper Moreland Township Board of Commissioners approved by a vote of 7-0 the conditional appointment of Randy T. Serviski as a probationary police officer, just 7 months after he graduated the Montgomery County Community College's Municipal Police Academy. And on February 4th, 2019, Serviski was sworn in as a police officer. It's unclear, based on the records I've found, if Serviski became an officer at the Fort Indiantown Gap Police Department or the North Londonderry Township Police. But at the time of the alleged assault of Veronika Rodriguez, Serviski was working alongside Sergeant Devin Kramer when Veronika Rodriguez first reported her assault. Prior to his work with the Fort Indiantown Gap PD, Serviski served in the Air National Guard and is also a member of the Horsham and Warrington Volunteer Fire Companies. Outside of his official duties, Serviski is married with children and attends the Mennonite church where Veronika's family are members. After just 4 years on the job, Veronika Rodriguez's complaint of sexual assault landed on Randy Serviski's desk. He teamed up with then Sergeant Devin Kramer, and the two started their investigation. Devin Kramer, on the other hand, had years of experience on her rookie affiant, Serviski. In 2008, Kramer began her law enforcement career as a Pennsylvania State Park Ranger with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, serving at the French Creek State Park Complex near Elverson, Pennsylvania, according to Lebtown. In 2009, she completed her municipal police officer training through the Pennsylvania State Police Academy. And in 2010, Kramer was hired as a police officer at the Fort Indiantown Gap Police Department in Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. FTIG is a large National Guard training base, and Kramer's role as an officer was to provide security and law enforcement services on the installation. In 2019, just as Serviski was learning the ropes, Kramer was promoted to sergeant after serving nearly a decade at FTIG. In this supervisory role, she not only oversaw other officers, but also took on lead investigator duties in criminal cases on the base, like Veronika Rodriguez's complaint of sexual assault in January of 2023. And just 8 months after investigating Veronika for making a false report and recommending the district attorney charge her with the false report and felony wiretapping, Kramer was promoted to chief of the Fort Indiantown Gap Police Department on September 16, 2023. She succeeded Chief Jared Burkheiser, who moved to another public safety role, and to the best of Kramer's knowledge, became the first female police chief in Lebanon County's history. As of this date, Devin Kramer is still chief of police and leads a department of over 20 sworn officers responsible for law enforcement at the FTIG military reservation. And yet, with all of Devin Kramer's experience in law enforcement and investigations, she and Serviski massively dropped the ball on the Veronika Rodriguez investigation, according to Carl Hirschman, who teaches other law enforcement departments how to investigate sex crimes.
So my name's Carlton Hirschman. I spent 8 years on active duty military, and that's how I got to San Diego, and I joined the police department there and worked as a cop for 32 years. 21 years of those were as a detective. Worked 10 years in Special Victims Unit, sexual assault, and 4 years in homicide. Also worked in our cyber unit, mainly cyber stalking with a sexual dynamic to it. A lot of it also is revenge pornography or image-based sexual abuse. I retired in 2017 by some local attorneys in San Diego to look at some cases. And so I did. I just started analyzing cases on top of traveling and doing training. So I have a consulting business now. I also do expert testimony, sexual assault investigations. So that kind of keeps me busy.
Yeah. Do you find that you're in high demand, like that the law enforcement agencies are looking for more training in the area of sex crimes?
Well, yes and no. So certain states, they go out of their way to get training for their officers, and others just don't.
That was Carl Hirschman. He has some very strong opinions about how Kramer and Serviski dropped the ball in this case. We'll get into how after a quick break.
In my expert opinion, Officer Randy Serviski and Sergeant Devin Kramer failed to complete a thorough, accurate, factual, and detailed investigation into Veronika Celeste Rodriguez's allegations of sexual assault. They drew premature conclusions from the information gathered in the early stages of their investigation and failed to make follow-up inquiries, which meant they did not properly assess the truth of their initial conclusions by corroborating or contradicting them. As a result, they did not properly assess whether Rodriguez was legally incapacitated and unable to consent to sex, or if she feared for her safety. We will never know the true facts of what occurred between Rodriguez and Fahad Pervez on January 8th, 2023, because of the failure of Officer Servisky and Sergeant Kramer to correctly investigate the incident.
That was a voice actor reading from retired detective Carl Hirschman's report, or Exhibit A, which found gross failures in the investigation into the alleged sexual assault. In May 2023, Veronika reached out to nationally recognized sex crimes investigator Carl Hirschman. If you don't know his name, let me put it like this. Carl spent 31 years with the San Diego Police Department, most of that time investigating sexual assault, image-based abuse, child molestation, rape, and everything in between. He's led more than 1,300 sex crimes cases and has trained law enforcement across the country. You may recognize him from the Netflix documentary Victim/Suspect, where he worked on 2 cases where the alleged victims were charged with false reporting. Now he's working on Veronika's case, and what he found is deeply disturbing, especially where Kramer and Servisky's investigation is concerned. Carl reviewed all of the police reports, interviews, forensics reports, and texts related to Veronika's case, and what he concluded was this. The investigation into her rape allegation was incomplete, unprofessional, and riddled with bias. He calls it a quote-unquote shortcut investigation. Those are his words, not mine. And in his expert opinion, shortcuts in sex crimes cases where victims already face immense scrutiny are a recipe for a disaster. Let me break down what he means by that. The 2 officers who handled Veronika's case, Officer Randy Servisky and Sergeant Devin Kramer, didn't conduct a trauma-informed interview when Veronika came into the station to report. They didn't collect critical evidence. They didn't follow up with key witnesses. And they didn't challenge the suspect, Fahad Pervez, in any meaningful way. Carl found that Veronika's behavior both during and after the incident was textbook for a non-stranger sexual assault survivor. She delayed reporting. She gave inconsistent statements. She texted friends about the encounter using language that didn't always make sense. But that doesn't make her a liar. That makes her human and traumatized. According to Carl, investigators didn't seem to understand the basic dynamics of sexual violence, especially when it involves someone the victim knows. They never conducted a pretext phone call, never subpoenaed surveillance video from the bar where Veronika says she was overserved, never interviewed the military investigators who already had a statement from Pervez, and shockingly, they never even did a forensic download of his phone, only hers.
With these 2, who I call Detective Itchy and Scratchy, they don't pick up on that, right? That how it got reported.
Yeah.
So they immediately just think that this is a cover. So she, follows through with the test. She gives up her phone. So she comes in, 48 hours later or whatever it was, which is fine, and to give her statement. And here's where the switch was buried. When they flip the switch on her, is she gives the detectives her phone, and they admonish her of her Miranda rights. So that tells me that now she's a suspect. And I'm thinking, well, why would they come to that conclusion very quickly? Is the way it was reported, because nothing else happened in between. Right. Nothing. So that was the only thing, and I read a lot of these, analyze a lot of cases across the nation, even Canada, and you can see how detectives work differently, but really it's all the same, right? Their mindset and the way this works. So anyway, I'm like, okay, well, they went down that rabbit hole real quick. When they read them rights, treat as a suspect. You don't read a victim their rights. Right. You may say, hey, can you sign a consent form so we can look into your phone, or can you just give us a verbal consent? Sure, but she doesn't know the law, or like, why did I get my my Miranda rights read to me? So anyway, then she signs a paper which I don't think it wasn't produced at trial. But to her, it's like, go ahead, yeah, look at all that stuff. When they look into her phone, they see all this text between her friends, and she talks about going out on a date with this, doctor or officer, whatever it is. I mean, it looks like she's bragging about it. So they're like, aha, see, she's not crying. She's not a real, rape victim. She's talking about the date, and then her ex-boyfriend. They bring all this other stuff in to make. They were slut shaming her, and they made her look bad. And she, with all that stuff, if you was to look at it, yeah, okay. So she's a little flirtatious. So even if she was a slut, are you saying that she wasn't sexually assaulted? Right. A lot of sex workers get, a lot of criminals get, sexually assaulted. Prisoners get sexually assaulted. But, it's that credibility thing that they didn't like about her. And then when they see into her phone, And this judge allows that stuff to come in.
Yeah.
And the DA was like, well, it's her mindset. Okay. And I wanted Veronica's lawyer to go, okay, well, what did you find in Perez's phone?
Exactly.
Well, nothing, because they didn't look at it. He's the suspect, supposedly.
Now let's talk about consent. One of the most important questions in any rape investigation is, did the suspect know, or should he have known, the victim couldn't give legal consent? According to Veronika, she had at least 5 or 6 mixed drinks, including a Long Island iced tea that she'd never had before. And she was so intoxicated she couldn't drive, couldn't see straight, and had to drink water from a bathroom sink to try to sober up. She said she told Perez no multiple times. Not always in direct language, but in polite refusals and nervous redirections, which is exactly what Carl says is common in non-stranger assaults. But to be clear, at one point in the audio, just as the alleged assault is about to happen, Veronika clearly and loudly says no. Instead of exploring that, Serviski and Kramer focused almost exclusively on inconsistencies in Veronika's story, which, again, is common in trauma cases. They used that to flip the script. Suddenly, she became the suspect, and the man she said raped her, he became the victim. Carl calls it the switch. It happens when investigators decide they no longer believe the victim and begin to build a case against her instead of her alleged rapist. And here's the most damning part. Carl says we may never know what actually happened between Veronika and Perez that night. Not because she wasn't telling the truth, but because the investigation was never designed to find it. The case was mishandled from the start, and that should scare every single one of us. Because if a young woman reports a rape and hands over her phone, her clothes, and her trauma, and the system turns around and arrests her, what message does that send to the next victim? And the one after that? Look, I've been doing this long enough to know that not every accusation is true. But I've also seen how easy it is for police to get it wrong, especially when they come in with bias or worse, tunnel vision. Carl Hirschman didn't just poke holes in this investigation, he dismantled it. And when you hear the actual evidence, the audio, the text, the timeline, it's clear something happened to Veronika that night, something she never wanted to become public, something that changed her life. And whether or not the criminal justice system is willing to recognize it, well, we should. Okay, so I've walked you through what Carl uncovered about the police investigation into Veronika Rodriguez's rape allegation. But now, I want to take you deeper into the evidence that should have shaped the investigation, starting with the timeline. Because as Carl put it, quote, you can't decide whether it's a false report unless you understand whether a rape happened, end quote. So January 8th, 2023, this is the night it happened. That night, Veronika met up with Fahad Pervez, a man she'd recently met on base. They went to Frog's Hollow Tavern after discovering their first choice, Snitz Creek Brewery, was closed. She didn't know his rank. She didn't know much about him at all. He ordered food and ordered multiple drinks for Veronika. Not one, multiple. This should be a place where getting to the truth should have been easy for the investigators, but it's something that, to this day, we don't have a concrete answer on. I can tell you Fahad says she only had 1 drink and disputes that she was drunk. Veronika, on the other hand, swears it was several drinks and she was very drunk. Serviski and Kramer went to Frog's Hollow and asked for surveillance footage from the tavern, but a manager said the system wasn't working. And that's as far as the investigators took it. They didn't subpoena the tavern for footage, and they didn't try to get an itemized receipt. Veronika and her current boyfriend, Hunter, however, decided to do some detective work themselves and actually went back to Frog's Hollow to break down the menu items Fahad said he purchased. You'll hear his explanation in another episode, but for now, here's what Veronika found when she was doing the police work Serviski and Kramer should have done on her behalf. We know the bill was $84 and change, and Fahad said they had calamari, a quesadilla, and a burger. So Veronika sent me a breakdown of the cost per item. The burger is $10, the quesadilla, $6. Calamari, which is no longer on the menu, used to be $5. So the food at the very most would have cost $21. Cocktails are $7 each, but they vary in price based on the liquor. 1 whiskey or bourbon is $5. According to Fahad's testimony at trial, he said, quote, honestly, I always like do 20% or more just because of humble beginnings. Yeah, I like to overtip, end quote. So if he tipped 20%, the bill would have been about $70 including tax. So we're looking at 70 minus 21 for the food, leaving $49. The sales tax in Pennsylvania is 6%, so about $4 for tax. That leaves $45 to spend on drinks. Fahad said he had 1 drink, maybe 2. In Veronika's first interview with the police, she said that the most amount of drinks she had was 6. 6 times 7 is $42. That wasn't very hard, was it? Why didn't the investigators at least do the math? I'd like to make a special note here for my audience that I am not a mathematician. It was my worst subject in school, so don't beat me up too badly if my numbers are slightly off. The point is, there was roughly $40 left after food that was spent on alcohol, and the investigators should have done their due diligence to get to that truth, but they didn't. And by the time they left, she said she was so intoxicated she could barely sit on the toilet. She was confused, disoriented, and started drinking water from the bathroom sink trying to sober up. And then things escalated. Veronika says she felt unsafe. So she did what a lot of us would do in that moment. She started recording. In that audio, she's clearly trying to deflect Pervez's advances. She asks, quote, "Aren't I going to get you sick?" End quote. And, quote, "Are you sure?" End quote. And finally, quote, "Don't. You're trying to kiss me, dude." End quote. Those aren't playful rejections. They're nervous attempts to say no without escalating the situation. At one point, she tells him she's not on birth control. He doesn't stop. He instead makes a joke that he can prescribe her something. He bites her chest hard enough to leave deep bruising. He removes her glasses, and she tells him she's blind without them. He had full control of the situation. She couldn't see, she couldn't drive, and she was in a secluded location in a car with a man who outranked her, outweighed her, and wasn't taking no for an answer, who had her keys, her wallet, her phone, and her glasses. Carl points out that her statements like, quote, "He had sex with me," end quote, are not the words of someone describing a mutual consensual act. They're the words of someone trying to survive something they didn't want. So here's what happened next. On January 11th, Veronika reported the assault to Fort Indian Town Gap Police. She brought her phone, her clothes, and a sexual assault advocate. She was distraught. She cried almost immediately as the interview began. She asked for the advocate to stay, but was told the policy didn't allow it. They made her choose, reschedule, or go in alone. She went in alone. According to Hirschman, that first interview was mishandled from the start. It lacked trauma-informed questioning. It treated Veronika more like a suspect than a survivor. Then came the switch. 2 days later, January 13th, she willingly turned over her phone to police. And that's when the narrative flipped. Instead of investigating Pervez, police began investigating Veronika. They scoured her texts, not for context, but for contradiction. They used inconsistencies, normal in trauma survivors, as weapons against her. They never followed up with the bar staff, never subpoenaed security footage from Frog's Hollow, never interviewed Pervez's wife, never followed up with the military investigators who already had a statement from him. And most critically, they never downloaded Pervez's phone. Not once. Veronika's phone? Downloaded, forensically examined, picked apart. Pervez's phone? Not even touched. Carl Hirschman called this quote-unquote one of the biggest failures in the case. Let's talk trauma control and the power imbalance that existed between Veronika and Fahad. Veronika was younger, lower rank, newly enlisted. She was drunk, isolated, afraid. Pervez was older, higher rank, a doctor. Allegedly, he flashed a badge and claimed to conduct psychological exams for police cadets. He was in control, from choosing the bar, ordering the drinks, driving the car, taking her glasses, taking her phone, taking her clothes off. Hirschman calls him controlling, and he lists every moment in that timeline where Pervez directed what happened. And what happened next? Veronika was charged, not him. Carl says, if you want to understand what happened that night, you don't just listen to the recording. You look at the behavior. You look at the power dynamics. You ask, why did she record? Why didn't she run? Why did she text friends in confusing ways? And you realize that's exactly what trauma looks like. Notably, Officer Servisky had disclosed prior to this case he had never previously investigated a sexual assault. And while he had undergone trauma-informed training, he could not elaborate on specifics when cross-examined. Investigative steps such as polygraph testing or searching Pervez's devices were not pursued either. And in one exchange during cross-examination, Veronika's attorney, Ian Airgood, asked Servisky, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Do you know what the legal limit is for consent?" To which Servisky answered, "Consent for what?" Which should tell you a lot about how these investigators may have dropped the ball or were possibly just too plain uninformed or uneducated in sex crimes investigations to investigate a sexual assault properly. But I put the onus on Sergeant Kramer here. She should have known better. She was a veteran of the police department and mere months later was elevated to chief of police. She is a 40-something-year-old woman who should remember what it feels like to be in your early 20s with a man you feel uncomfortable with and no way to escape. What would Kramer have done if she had been in Veronika's shoes? What strikes me here in this story is that the people who came after Veronika the hardest were women. Then Sergeant and soon-to-be Chief of Police Devin Kramer, who recommended charges against Veronika, and District Attorney Pierre Hesgraff, who charged her, took her to trial, and asked for 16 years in prison for a false report and 2 felony counts of wiretapping. There's some debate on whether Veronika should have been charged in the first place, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'm still stuck on what appears to be the internalized misogyny of these 2 powerful women. In my opinion, on the outside looking in, it feels like Devin and Pierre are desperate to fit into the boys' club. They remind me of Officer Kelly Dever from the Karen Reed trial, who changed her testimony about seeing Brian Higgins and the chief of police in the Sallyport when pressed by her brothers in blue. Internalized misogyny is a real thing. Steve Behrman, MS, Neil Korobov, PhD, and Avril Thorne, PhD, of the University of California, Santa Cruz, conducted a study for the Journal of Integrated Social Studies called The Fabric of Internalized Sexism. And they found internalized sexism is routine and often goes unchallenged in women's conversations, even between close friends. Internalized misogyny is a byproduct of living in a sexist system where men hold institutional power, women are rewarded for compliance and punished for defiance, and where misogynistic ideas are embedded in law, media, and language. Women internalize the values of a society that was not built to serve them, and then act on those values, even against themselves or each other. And for someone like Pierre Hesgraff, who was slut-shamed herself when she was appointed district attorney by an alleged ex-lover, punishing a woman for reporting her own alleged sexual assault is pretty rich. Though Pierre's record on bringing sexual assault cases to trial in the past 3 years is also pretty bleak, she's only done it 1 time in 3 years. And that one case? Veronika Rodriguez. More on the charges and this pesky wiretap Veronika conducted after a short break. In March 2023, Veronika Rodriguez was formally charged with 2 counts of felony wiretapping and 1 count of making a false report to law enforcement in connection with her allegation of sexual assault at Fort Indiantown Gap. But let's break down how and why she was charged, shall we? After a short investigation, Kramer and Serviski recommended the DA charge Veronika. That's normal, but why these charges? Why ask for this harsh sentence? Let me remind you, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Veronika can serve up to 2 years for making a false report and 7 years for each felony wiretap. District Attorney Pierre Hesgraff is asking for the maximum sentence. But even the quote-unquote victim in this case, Fahad Pervez, plans to ask for a more lenient sentence for Veronika in his victim impact statement at her sentencing hearing on August 20th, 2025. I can't believe I just uttered that last sentence aloud, but here it is.
Because I was never charged, and I never thought I did anything wrong, but we can talk about the mistake that I made. And then I have all the other stuff. Oh gosh, they read everything in court. It was just awkward and embarrassing.
Yeah.
They also played the entire audio. I have that too, by the way. I don't know if you have the actual audio of the entire night.
No, I just read the transcripts. I think that, that's a pretty major issue still because it's a wiretapping case. So I don't want you to share that with me because then, that we get into trouble there. So, but I've yeah.
But if it's I don't know honestly, but if it was played in court, then it's public records.
I think if it were coming from you, it would be different because you are the victim in the case as far as the wiretapping goes. So if you wanted to send it to me, that would be fine. But I obviously can't play any of it, and even
that's fine.
Even if it was played in court, there's still the issue of disseminating it. So, so there's a fine line, and I wouldn't want either one of us to get into trouble for that. So sure. I appreciate the offer. I would be open to seeing the text conversations. I've seen some of them. I've seen, bits and pieces here and there, and I've talked to the experts in the case, and, I've talked to some of the lawyers, and I've talked to witnesses. So, and let me tell you where I'm coming from, just so I'm very clear.
Sure.
I'm a journalist, and my baseline is I do believe women. And so when I come at this case, what I see and what I saw, even before I started researching, was, a young 20-something who had accused someone of sexual assault, wasn't believed, and then was immediately charged with a very strong sentence. The DA is asking for 16 years. So,
oh my God, that's wow.
Yeah, you didn't know that. No.
Holy
So
shit,
the DA is asking for 7 years for one of the felony counts of wiretapping, 7 years for the other, and 2 years for a false report. That's Fahad Pervez, the man at the center of this case, offering me the actual audio recording Veronika captured that night. Seem odd to you? Yeah, it did me too. If Veronika committed a felony because she recorded Fahad without his permission, why is he offering to share that recording with me, a journalist? Isn't he mortified? Isn't he harmed by her actions? Here's a question. If the victim in this case is offering to disseminate the recording, has it lost its oomph? Does it really require a felony? Because keep in mind, Veronika is being charged with not one, but two felonies for wiretapping in this case. One for recording without Fahad's consent because PA is a two-party consent state, which means you need permission from the party you're recording before you can record, and two, for disseminating the recording to a couple of friends. But now Fahad is fine sharing the audio and all the evidence with a journalist. How do you get all the evidence to begin with?
The DA sent me a copy of it, before I even testified.
Yeah.
Our expired text transcript and
So let's break down the actual felonies. I want to point out some issues with the charges. If you listen to my first season about Pamela Smart, you might remember superhero post-conviction attorney Matt Zernheld, who is representing Pam in her current habeas petition. Matt and I have become very close over the past year, and I consider him a dear friend, as well as the person I text frantically in the middle of the night to ask things like, if the victim in the wiretapping crime offers to give me the whole audio, would it be illegal for me to accept it and or put it in my episodes? Inquiring minds. He's very patient with me and also loves the law, so he usually researches whatever it is and comes back with an informed and profound answer for me. He also loves case law and statutes, which some of us might find boring, but I find fascinating, including and especially this one. From the Pennsylvania Chapter 57 Wiretapping and Electronic Surveillance Statutes 17. Any victim, witness, or private detective licensed under the Act of August 21st, 1953, PL 1273, number 361, known as the Private Detective Act of 1953, to intercept the contents of any wire, electronic, or oral communication if that person is under a reasonable suspicion that the intercepted party is committing, about to commit, or has committed a crime of violence, and there is reason to believe that evidence of the crime of violence may be obtained from this interception. Let that sink in for a moment. If a person, any victim, witness, or PI, someone like Veronika, who thinks that the intercepted party, someone like Fahad, is about to commit or has committed a crime of violence and there is reason to believe that evidence of the crime of violence may be obtained from the interception, they can record that individual. I'm going to give you a few more seconds to let that hit your brain. So did Pierre Graff just miss this particular statute when she chose to charge Veronika under PA statutes Section 5703, interception, disclosure, or use of wire, electronic, or oral communications? Or did she think no one would notice? I haven't received the trial transcripts yet, but I hear from someone who was in the courtroom that during the judge's instructions to the jury, he references this statute and says that they can't determine what a violent crime might be. This sounds a little weak to me, but I think it has more to do with the DA and investigators just not believing that Veronika thought she was in danger. They sold the jury on alleged malicious intent to blackmail Fahad, which they made up out of whole cloth. Here's another thing no one seemed to notice. Fahad Pervez may be cozier with the lead detective and now chief of police, Devin Kramer, and her family than anyone else previously knew. I'm going to ask you again, who are Graff and Kramer trying to protect or cover for with these trumped-up charges against a 24-year-old woman who is just trying to report a rape? A couple weeks ago, an anonymous source I've been working with who says she dated Fahad Pervez in the past and understands what Veronika went through that night, sent me a text via Signal. It was Fahad Pervez's Venmo account. At first, nothing stood out to me. Then the name Joseph Kramer leapt off the screenshot. My source told me what she did to determine who this Joseph Kramer was, but I needed to go a step further to verify because the transaction was dated May 22nd, 2025, the day before the jury came back with their verdict in Veronika's trial. And it looks like Fahad paid Joseph for a quote-unquote dinner. There was no dollar amount attached to the transaction, so I don't know how much it was for and if it was in fact for dinner. Honestly, I don't even know if it was Joseph Kramer Fahad had dinner with. It could have been his wife, Devin Kramer, or a group of people that included Joseph Kramer and his wife, chief of police, Devin Kramer. Regardless, if Fahad paid the chief of police's husband for something during the trial, at the very least it should raise ethical concerns and at the most, misconduct. So I needed to verify further. I did background checks on both Kramers and discovered they're close in age, both in their 40s. They live at the same address. Their Facebooks, though private, have pictures of them together. And Devin changed her name when she married Joseph Kramer. And then I found it. Something bigger than all that. J. Kramer, 2523. That's Joseph's Venmo. It matches his email, jkramer, 2523. So Fahad Pervez paid the chief of police's husband for something he labeled dinner on May 22nd, 2025. When I asked Fahad about the transaction, he said this. Do you have any close connection with the current chief of police? She was one of the investigators on your case, Devin Kramer. Are you friendly with her or her husband or
No,
anybody?
I have no relationship with anybody from Pennsylvania except the people who were in my unit. Like, I have no contact with anyone.
Like, never went out to dinner with them or anything like that?
Oh, I swear to God. I mean, no.
Okay.
I have had no contact. The first time I met them was when I went to make a statement.
Seems to me like he lied. It also seems to me he didn't even hesitate to do so. Now, let me give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he forgot he went to dinner with or paid the chief's husband 2 months ago while the trial was happening. Maybe if I ask him again, he'd change his story. All I know is I followed up via text a day or so later after our interview with a screenshot of his Venmo and asked, "This yours?" To which he responded, "Yes." So to be clear, the actual Fahad Pervez's Venmo sent an untold amount of money to Joseph Kramer, who is the husband of the lead investigator on Veronica's sexual assault case, who then chose to recommend charges to the DA against Veronica before becoming chief of police about 7 to 8 months after the investigation wrapped. And this transaction was labeled quote unquote dinner, and it happened one day before the trial ended. I'm telling the world this for the first time here, but please know, I've also given this information to Veronica's lawyers, who may or may not, but probably should, file a motion with the court regarding misconduct and request a mistrial before August 20th, 2025. And just a shout out to my anonymous source and to the brave women who've reached out to me to tell me their stories. Thank you for bringing this to my attention so I could dig into it further. It might help us shed some light on this very dark and twisted case. It took a lot of courage to get in touch with me, and I'm hoping more women will come forward about their experiences in Lebanon County and beyond. The Venmo transaction got me thinking, what else are they hiding? And by they, I mean Fahad Pervez, Chief Kramer, Pierre Hesgraf, law enforcement in the surrounding counties, and that's when I was virtually introduced to Shahana Doyle. As if this case couldn't become more twisted, I've been introduced to another victim. This woman is telling her story of being sex trafficked from the ages of 2 to 16 by her own father, Roland Doyle, a local Mechanicsburg businessman and constable, and her mother, who was forced to record Roland Doyle raping his own child. This story may seem out of left field when it comes to Veronica's story, but there's an alleged link. Fahad Pervez. Shahana Doyle says he was in business with her father before Doyle died in 2023. What kind of business, you ask? That's what I'll dig into next week on The In-Between, when I reveal a very lengthy conversation with the man Veronica alleged sexually assaulted her, Fahad Pervez. You won't want to miss this conversation. So until then, be good people, don't do murder, and take no for an answer. Next time on The In-Between.
Honestly, I don't know, because
I mean, I can tell you, I can give you some advice if you want it,
Sure.
from a woman. Just communicate. If it comes to a place where a woman is saying to you, no, don't do that, it's okay to ask them questions. Am I making you uncomfortable?
The first day I was there was when Veronica testified. For me, that was very challenging to watch.
I just didn't think they would do anything. At that point, I was so emotionally exhausted from having to explain the story so many times and having people brush it off that I felt like calling the FBI would just be a waste of time. They would just tell me to call, I don't fucking know, the CIA or somebody else.
Yeah.
I had been brushed off about 10 times that day, so I gave up.
Big thing that people have misunderstood about Veronika Rodriguez's case, and I think that the district attorney and law enforcement, the civil law enforcement, have just really completely failed to understand is the stark power dynamic between a major in the U.S. Army and an enlisted airman who just joined a few months ago. It's very similar to a student-teacher dynamic.
Yeah.
And so, regardless of what actually happened that night, even if the DA's version of events are true, the man who was accused is not a victim. He was a 40-something-year-old major, which is a senior officer in the military, caught in a car doing lewd activities with a much, much junior soldier, and that creates a very stark power dynamic. It's wholly inappropriate in the military. It's against the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and I just think that's something that the system in this situation, how it was applied in Veronica's case, just totally lost sight of.
A lot of this focus on saying that she's a liar.
Yeah.
One big thing that I've noticed with her is she mentioned like she has PTSD. I know there was one time she was like, you could tell she was just struggling. I tried to like hold her a little bit, and she just let out this god awful scream of like, no. I mean, that hurt. That cut me deep because I felt like I was doing something wrong, and I'm like, I know that I'm not.
Yeah.
She's not. She was dead asleep. There is no way to fake the subconscious. That is a subconscious 100%.
Yep.
Because she is asleep, and you can't fake that. You can't lie about that. You can't make that up.
Yeah.
That is her reaction to a thing that happened to her. That is like stereotypical PTSD.
Very familiar with it myself, so I understand. And what you just said really touched me because you don't often. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. You don't often hear from the partners of people who have been traumatized, and so that's when you get attacked. Is when your subconscious is trying to sleep. And I appreciate you saying, that everyone is calling her a liar, but these are the real moments that she's experiencing. And I've been in that situation. I think most women understand that situation. And she was doing all of the right things. And I'll say that because she was trying not to get murdered. The In Between podcast is written, edited, and hosted by me, Mel Barrett, and is a production of Ruby Grace Productions. If you want ad-free exclusive content, bonuses, and lives, head on over to the In Between podcast Patreon and sign up. The researcher level starts at $6, and there's already 20-plus ad-free episodes for you to binge right now. Special thanks to Amber Hunt for editorial guidance, as well as the rest of the team at Grab Bag Collab, Amanda Rossman, and Daisy Egan for their support and guidance. Another special thanks to Rebecca Lavoie for her friendship and mentorship. You can catch me and Rebecca recapping the Karen Reed trial on the Crime Writers on The Readathon. Follow the In Between podcast on Blue Sky, Facebook, and YouTube at In Between Pod, and on Instagram at the In Between Pod Official. On TikTok, you can follow me at Jack of All Trades DC. Thanks for listening.